Up until a point, I was pretty uncomfortable with talking about unfinished comics, mainly because I feel like unfinished comics carry a burden to them. Sadly, comics don't always go unfinished because the creator got sidetracked with work and life. Sadly, those comics go unfinished because that creator is no longer here with us. And although the artwork that they created is a part of their legacy and their memory, and it should be repeated and carried on, I would always much rather have a creator here with us, walking among us on this earth, than no longer with us at all. Comics like Satoshi Kon's Opus and more recently Berserk deserve to be talked about and remembered. The people behind those stories and characters deserve to be lived on. In turn, there's so many comics and webcomics that I have read throughout the years that will never continue, and that's not a problem. Webcomics like The Crawling City that I adored will never come back, and that's completely fine. In turn, they continue through the form of spiritual successors, while other webcomics were created by young creators who outgrew those comics and went on to create bigger and better things, or maybe they just fell out of love with art and drawing and don't really want to touch that comic again. And all of those are completely fine. After all, art is a luxury and a privilege that we get to enjoy, especially something that was created and put out on the internet for free for our entertainment. And that's something that we all must remember when consuming art and media. I've talked about one unfinished comic on this channel previously in one of my reading videos, a comic called Raru Ren, which is a very hard title for me to pronounce. That was a comic that I started reading years ago and that I will continue to wait forever on if it does return. But the creator of that comic got sidetracked with work, and they're still drawing, creating amazing art to this day. They even did official artwork for the video game Horizon Zero Dawn. While I highly recommend for you to read that comic, I just as highly recommend for you to go out and seek the creator and support their work, as they do make amazing artwork that is just a feast for the eyes. And it is a very similar case with the comic that we're about to talk about. Lonely Vincent Bellingham is a comic I'm talking about today because even though I started reading it back when chapter 2 was publishing in about 2015, I continue to think about and remember this comic with fond memories even now in 2022. And despite it being incredibly short with only 3 chapters and having gone on indefinite hiatus back in 2018 when chapter 3 just began, I often go back and reread and revisit this comic because of how charming it is. Even after all these years, even knowing that this comic may never return to me, I still love it just as much as I did back when I started reading it when I was in high school. The Lonely Vincent Bellingham is a comic created by Diana, whose last name I am terrified to pronounce and I am not going to butcher it. And it went on indefinite hiatus because Diana got caught up in work. Diana is a storyboard artist and a director who has worked on projects such as DuckTales, She-Ra, and Infinity Train. She's also done some official comic publications for that of Adventure Time, but to my knowledge, this is her only webcomic and or independent work. The Lonely Vincent Bellingham takes place sometime in about the late 1800s, maybe early 1900s, where the main character Vincent is a lonely rich boy who, with great admiration for his professor, goes out and decides to try and seek a woman in an old photo. He arrives in the town she may reside in, only to discover that absolutely no one has any idea who she is. With nightfall approaching and having no accommodation for the night, night. He's about to call it until he sees smoke escaping from what is a chimney. He follows the trail and finds a house in the middle of the woods where nobody lives, of course. He knocks on the door, and there's the woman in the photo. Only the thing is, she hasn't aged a day because that photo is almost 50 to 100 years old. Vincent gets the door slammed on him. He's told to go away, but after noting his connection and friendliness to his professor, she reluctantly lets him in, and after a bit of back and forth, she reluctantly lets him sleep in her basement. The next day, he finds that the house is not only inhabited by this beautiful woman, but also a young girl and a young boy. The name of the woman he's been searching for is Victoria, and the two young children she lived with are Ursula and Luke. Vincent decides to take a chance and ask Ursula, how is it that Victoria is still so young even though the photo is so old? And Ursula responds that it's obvious because Victoria is a vampire, Ursula is a witch, and Luke is a werewolf. So now Vincent finds himself in this house with three supernatural beings. One is incredibly trusting and energetic, another standoffish and secluded, and the third who pointed a gun to his head and will kill him at any moment. But it's very clear that nobody here wants trouble. They just want to live their peaceful lives in the woods, not being known by anyone else, or else there may be danger, which is why Victoria didn't want Vincent to enter in the first place, and which is why Vincent threatens blackmail and exposure in order for him to stay the night. Of course, Vincent isn't going to out this family because he's a good person, but of course Victoria still doesn't completely trust him despite him being very friendly with the children and his connection to his professor. Chapter 3 starts. Vincent negotiates staying with Victoria in her home for a little while longer, and then the comic ends. And it hasn't returned in the 4 years since. Since then, as noted, Diana has been busy. Before the comic went on indefinite hiatus, it did go on a brief hiatus, and it returned for chapter 3, and then we only got 3 pages of chapter 3, and it's been over. And nobody can blame anybody for not being able to return to their project because of life and work. Hell, I have incompleted projects here on this channel that I haven't been able to return to because of life and work, and I've recently lost all of my scripts with all of my notes, so it's back to square one, including all of my saga notes. Yeah. Despite her work on this comic going incomplete, which absolutely should not matter and does not speak to her ability as a creator, Diana has a prolific and extensive and beautiful portfolio that she has been constantly updating for years that you definitely should check out. If you are a fan of the shows that I mentioned that she worked on, you should go onto her website and see some of the behind the scenes artwork that she has posted. She is a wonderful creator, and every now and again she will draw artwork of these characters, but if you follow her social media, there doesn't seem to be any plans for her to return to this webcomic. And as much as I would like to see the return of Vincent, as long as I'm willing to wait, I will wait forever, in eternity and a half. As much as I would adore the return of this comic, can't always get what we want. Not everything is going to end, and not everything is meant to end. What makes me so fond of and return to this comic is its art style and its character. Dana's artwork on this comic is very atmospheric. The colors and the shading and the simple yet effective and adorable character designs in regards to Victoria and Ursula drew me into this comic and was what got me to read it years ago. Then, as the story continued for the first 2 chapters, I fell in love with these characters. Luke being a solitary werewolf makes sense because he's a werewolf and he could possibly hurt people. Ursula is a bubbly young witch, and she has this very charming and energetic personality where you just can't help but fall in love with her as soon as you meet her. Then you get Victoria, who is understandably very protective of these two young adopted slash fostered children that she may have, that she wants to train and help grow into effective young members of society, but she keeps them away from society in this little secluded house in the woods, probably because she doesn't want to affect or suppress their nature. And then of course you have Vincent, who is, in my opinion, the star of the show. In chapter 2 we see that Vincent didn't have the best home life, and after all, the title of this comic is The Lonely Vincent Bellingham, so yeah, he is pretty lonely. In the second chapter, Vincent helps the children clean, and he doesn't know how to clean at all, demonstrating that he is someone who came from a lot of wealth and pleasure, but that didn't affect him in his human nature and need for kindness and affection, because those are two things he didn't seem to have a lot of back when he was home, especially after his father died and he disrespected his own father at his funeral. Nevertheless, after helping the children clean their home, he proves himself to be someone that can be trusted. And then we go on to chapter 3, and I would love to see more of Vincent and his character. I would love to see more development and learn more about his home life and see him finally get what every human being needs, only the comic ends. And I keep going back and reread it just to get a taste of what this comic could have and bring, just to imagine and fantasize what could happen next. It's not like I'm constantly going back onto Hiveworks to reread this comic every day. God knows I have so many comics to read, and God knows there's so many comics on Hiveworks alone that I should be getting back to, like Wildlife. But when it comes to comics that I've known for years, that I've been familiar with for years, that remain on my mind for years, this is on the forefront. There's been so many comics I've read throughout the years. So many. Smiled Brush, Love Not Found, Shoot Around, All That You Are. And those comics I've found to range from fine to really great. And some of them are finished, some of them probably still publishing, but I never got back to. But comics like these, ones where, again, it is a luxury to experience them, not a right, where you're still thinking about them and remembering them. We all have a comic exactly like this. And for you, it may not be The Lonely Vincent Bellingham. Maybe you don't want to go out of your way to read a comic with 3 short chapters and have a sort of affection for it like I do. And that's completely fine. The way I see it is that there will always be more, and that comes from the creator and their portfolio. I continue to go back to this comic because Diana has a wonderful portfolio, as she is a wonderful artist. I continue to read Raru Ren, not out of hopes that one day it will come back, but out of support for Anne, as I think she is an incredible creator who still draws some amazing artwork that, dude, I wish I had the money for prints. Like, if I had the money, I would have her work on my wall right now as we speak. And at the end of the day, that's what really matters when I discuss these unfinished comics and try to figure out how exactly I want to talk about them and support them, to shine a spotlight on their creator, because not every artist has to make a comic or be a part of some animation team or this, that, and the other. They just have to create. And if they create art that you like, that you love, that you find value in, then I think that that artist has accomplished something. Because the reason why creators create is so that somebody somewhere can enjoy them. And this is my appreciation post. This is what I'm trying to accomplish as I figure out how I'm going to talk about these unfinished comics more and try and become more comfortable with talking about unfinished comics and break out of my completionist mindset, because not every single comic that I discuss on this channel has to be complete. This is literally just me trying to express affection and admiration to an artist and their work. And there sadly won't always be times where I can make a video like this without feeling rather sad, like the Nana video I'm trying to make. And if you know what Nana is and its history, I'm afraid that when I eventually finish rewriting the script, it's not going to be a very sunshine and rainbows video, but that's just how it is when it comes to art. Not everybody is meant to stick around long enough to make art forever. While The Lonely Vincent Bellingham is a short comic that lived a short life during its runtime and that we may never see again, it isn't the only one, and it isn't the only one with this kind of story. There are more unfinished comics that I would like to talk about with different stories that I think we can all learn from. And I think the lesson from this one is there's always more, just not more of this. That's about it, I guess. I'm still trying to work things out, but I just wanted to make a video. If you like some of Diana's artwork that you've seen in this video, of course, I'll always be linking the creators in the link below. Please check her out. Please check out some of the shows she's worked on. If you have an unfinished comic that is rather personal to you or that you love, kind of like me in this one, let me know, because God knows I'm always looking for more stuff to read, even though I don't need more stuff to read. Yay. That's about it. I gotta get back to work on the Nana video. I'll catch you all in the next one.